That's some sweet stuff right there. Pontifications. That's Thor Polson, and we're going to be speaking with Thor now. Take a little bit of a, I'm not sure if it's a right turn or a left turn, after talking with Henrik Sajewski about the plight of the Uyghurs. And we had our first hour here on Planet Erstwhile donated to, a tribute, I guess it's a donation in a way, a tribute to the tragic events at Cafe Racer in Seattle with Aaron Skipper, who is from there, had many friends involved in that cafe, dealing with the aftermath of the tragedy there, honoring some of the musicians actually that were killed in that event. We really appreciate Aaron stopping by. Thor Polson is who we're going to be speaking with now, out of Portland. His project Northern Lights, and that is sweet stuff. Some great jazz. Tom Allen in the house as well has done some compositions as part of this. So as we ease the music out, hard to do that. It's such sweet stuff. Let's welcome Thor to the airwaves. Thor, how you doing today?
Hello, gentlemen. It's great to talk with you. I should begin by pointing out I'm actually down here in Southern Oregon. I'm in Ashland versus Portland.
Oh, big difference. There's a big difference between those two, isn't it?
Yeah, there is. We get much nicer weather down here, for one thing, yeah.
Well, great. Now, Thor, tell me a little bit just give us a little bit of a thumbnail sketch about yourself. We'll get into the project. We'll bring Tom into the discussion as well, but give us just a little bit of your background. But I have to say, this record, you very generously presented some for the station that we're going to use to great effect. What beautiful music. A little bit about your background.
Well, I guess I could say that I consider any form of human expression to be something practically sacred. So it's taken a lot of twists and turns in terms of writing or playing music or practically anything. That's what's really driven me throughout my life, and it's taken me in different directions. Writing, again, music, teaching. I teach languages here locally. I teach German and Latin at a school in Medford, Oregon, and I'd say my primary interests have been languages, music, and writing and literature and things like that, really.
Well, that's a good background. And where did you, in terms of where you grew up and all that kind of thing? Northern Lights, sounds to me a little bit like a Minnesota kind of thing.
Well, most recently I lived in Minnesota. That's, in fact, where I met Tom Allen. We taught at a music studio in the western suburbs in Eden Prairie. I was born and raised in Kansas City, Missouri, and spent quite a bit of my life in the Midwest, including 6 years in Iowa. I went to Grinnell College, and I spent a couple of years in Iowa City, so I have a strong Iowa tie. And I think I even it's awfully beautiful out here, but I have some definite pangs when I think about the Midwest. I still feel very strongly rooted there, I have to say.
Well, I'd have to say myself, if you've been to Iowa City and you're a writer, and all those interests certainly intertwine in a very nice ball there with the great writing emphasis they have there, great music. I hail from Madison, Wisconsin, and I always think of Iowa City as a baby Madison. I think of Madison as sort of a baby Berkeley. And those are all nice roots, I think. But let me ask you this. You spent some time in Grinnell. Now, that is one beautiful campus as well.
It is. Those were some of the best years of my life. I actually ended up writing a novel about that experience, although it doesn't very closely resemble what I experienced at Grinnell. I mean, it doesn't line up, one-to-one, but that had quite an impact on my life. It was just like a little island in the middle of a bunch of fields, really. I have such a pleasant memory of that time. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Sort of like being, well, not quite an ocean of corn in some ways out here, but...
And that's I ran cross-country. I used to run miles and miles through all these cornfields, and it was so beautiful, the big sky, and I have very pleasant memories of Iowa.
Well, Iowa does have great skies. Tell me a little bit, Thor. We're speaking with Thor Polson, a musician, a writer, a teacher, a lot of different things. Tom Allen in the studio. He'll be joining us in just a second. This is James Moore, Planet Erstwhile, every Friday, 2 to 5 p.m. online at KRUU-FM.com. For those listening abroad, we appreciate you tuning in. Shout out to all our streamers, as it were. Let me ask you a little bit about your musicality. What is your background and your forte there?
Well, I grew up playing classical music, and I was turned on to jazz when I was in my mid-teens, and I followed up on that in college. And that's when I began to go in other directions, languages and so on. And I spent most of my life as a language teacher, but I'd say about 15 years ago, there's always a little voice. If we listen to it carefully enough, it's trying to point us in the right direction or a different direction. I then decided to devote far more time to music, and I could never quit playing the piano. I mean, as much as, even if I'd wanted to somehow, I don't think that I could have. I just kept that up through the years, and finally I thought, well, I'll just go back to it. And I did, completely. I devoted almost all of my attention to that. And I always loved jazz, and so I moved to the Twin Cities and I was in several groups there. And in fact, the CD that you've just played, every musician on there was someone that I gigged with steadily, constantly. And as I say in the liner notes, it's really just I say that love always bears offspring of some kind, and there was such a strong emotional element to that recording. I flew back last summer to record it, and it was just, it's as if I'd been away for about a year and a half, and it's as if I flew back and picked the fruit from the tree, which had ripened in the meantime. And that includes Tom Allen's contributions too on the CD. I mean, Tom and I were good friends, and we knew each other for years, and it was just a very fruitful collaboration, and just a lot of. They're all family. They're all, it's. I don't know. Well, you're a musician yourself, James. You know how it is.
I do, and it's a perfect entree for Tom Allen, who's sitting here. Maybe we should hear from Tom a little bit, then we'll hear one of your compositions and go from there. I'm a big fan of Minneapolis. My sister went to college there. I was accepted in communications and then ended up going overseas and not making it back there to study radio, believe it or not. But I have very many dear friends that live up there. I don't know if you ever came across Mark Anderson, Steve Tibbetts, who I went to high school with, some amazing musicians, an amazing scene. I have friends from New York who have said if it wasn't for the winter, they would, they liked it even more than New York in some ways. A lot of great stuff up there in Minneapolis. Tom, great to see you. Thanks for coming in today, and thanks for actually helping kind of materialize this little interview. And tell me a little bit about your collaborations with Thor. I know you've been on before sharing some of your music here, and then we'll set up a piece to listen to.
Okay, great. Well, Thor is a really amazing guy, and he's turned the whole, for one thing, economic thing of music on its ear with this. Everybody's saying, well, how do I make money in music and all this kind of stuff? And Thor has totally entered into the thing of giving in order to get. In other words, don't say, well, where's mine as a first step? But he, as I think the audience should know, this is really, really neat. He has said, I'm going to give these things away, all of them, to anybody who wants to, in turn, sell them or use them somehow, even for their own gain, but exclusively charitable purposes. And so he paid the musicians who played, and now he's doing this as good karma, you might say. He's putting it out there. It's being played on public radio or some equivalent of this station in Oregon a lot. It's getting a lot of airplay, and it's a really, really neat thing. I found it to be a wonderful guy in many ways, and that's just one of them.
Well, fantastic. Yeah, I have to say the music is smooth. It sounds like the man is smooth. And we'll give another listen here, but I find it intriguing, this whole concept of connecting, of language. Music is a language. We actually had a cook or a person, the chief minister from the country of Bhutan, on our Great Taste live cooking show this week, and his name actually was Karma. So we figure this is we hear more and more good karma this week. Oh, can never get enough of that, I don't think. But I was talking with somebody else, and they said, well, I consider musicians to be artists, and I said, yeah, I think the best music is basically paintings for the ear, And that said, I'll let you set up, Thor, what piece of music you want to we can play from Northern Lights that you and Tom worked on.
Well, the introductory piece was it's an excerpt taken from it's one of the themes from his Requiem that he wrote. That he's commissioned to write that, and that's what everyone heard first. The theme was from Remembering Judy Schramm, which he was commissioned to write, and then he provided. And Tom, you brought the original melody. Is there any way we're going to be able to hear that, or should I go straight to my piece?
Well, go ahead,
James. Yeah, this is really funny. I wrote this funny little short theme in 7/8 time, and I was doing these exercises. When I'd write something every day, I'd first of all verbally write what I was feeling, and then I'd write the melody. I was feeling rotten awful and every other thing you could, and I wrote this little melody, and it's so funny. I mean, and over again that's happened in my writing, but I played this for Thor in the studio, and the second time he was sitting there sort of chuckling and stuff. So anyway, here's the brief theme, and then you'll hear what Thor did with it, which is completely different but really neat.
So that is some beautiful stuff. How about that, dear listener? Did you catch that? So Tom wrote that initial theme, was a little bit faster. Thor put it through the Polsonifier, Thor Polson there, and came out with kind of a, well, I don't know what you want to call that, but something that had lank jazz and a lot of something smooth in there, but a beautiful melody. Tom, beautiful stuff. Thor, what's your take on that? What'd you do with that piece of music?
I heard it, and I wrote it as part of a suite of pieces called Four Seasons in St. Paul, and it was intended to have a really hard urban edge to it, and I had a strong visual attached or associated with all of this. I mean, I remember so many nights driving home from the music studio, for example, and it was, November, early December. I was thinking, man, it's cold, and I was thinking about the onset of yet another Minnesota winter. So the piece is meant to have a really strong urban edge to it, and it ends with a snowstorm. That was the and all the pieces are meant to reflect the Four Seasons in St. Paul. It was I begin with that set of pieces actually on the album.
It's great, and I just love art that is about, where you are standing, what you are seeing, what the seasons are doing, that's that intimately wrapped in your visceral, your sensual experience. That is, it's just a lovely thing. Is that something you've done? I know we're focusing on Northern Lights. Do we want to talk a little bit further afield in terms of your production? And then we'll also ask you about this idea of being as generous as you are with the way you're distributing this.
Yeah, well, as for the first question, I don't know. You guys are both musicians. I don't always associate a particular image, visual image, with a piece of music, but in that case, I mean, that was what motivated really the conception and the realization of the conception. For example, when I hear the piece on Green Dolphin Street, I always think of sunlight streaming into an empty room with a wooden floor. I don't know why, but I just do. But it's not I don't necessarily attach an image with pieces. Do you?
No, not always. I just think the best music evokes images one way or the other, and obviously can just be flat out on the emotional level, but even each emotion has sort of a color, a palette, and yes, I understand what you're saying. It's not like a cartoon or a picture or a person or necessarily a geography appears. I just remember the first time I heard Chick Corea's song, a certain song, and I'd just been to a certain country, and I got back and said, wow, this reminds me exactly of Spain, and that was the song Spain, and obviously you're evoking Spanish rhythms and some, there's an easy way for that to happen, but there's another way that and you're absolutely right, it doesn't need to be a picture. What about you, Tom? What do you think on that subject?
Well, a whole bunch of things more than there's time to say, but one of the things that was popping through my mind a minute ago is, Vivaldi wrote this Four Seasons, which is completely different, and Thor has done this totally from his own perspective, as you were talking about, his own boots, what it's like to live in the Twin Cities. He's a man of many geographical places. He's going to be in the Kansas City for the Jazz Festival there. We'd like to get him up here. I don't think we're going to get him this year, but maybe sometime in the future have him come to Fairfield and plop down at Paradiso or something like that. But, the creativity of this guy is really something. He had everybody's respect when I knew him up there, and wonderful music.
Well, Thor, what do you think? We got 2-3 minutes left here. Where are you going with this project? What are you working on now? And just any general thoughts. We're open.
One reason I'm going to Missouri. I'm going back to Kansas City, where I was born and raised. I'm going to, in advance of a possible move in a year from this summer, possibly. And it's not so much a jazz festival as it is a jazz camp. I'm going to stop by and see what the young people are doing with the music and what they're bringing to the music. I'll attend the final concert and visit friends and so on. So I have a strong conception of where I want to go with this, and I think I may have to move back to a metro area. And since it's so freezing cold in St. Paul, Missouri is a logical choice, although it's amazingly hot and muggy, of course. I mean, it's one thing or the other, but that's what's sort of driving that.
Well, how interesting.
I would like to bring together, it's a set vision, really. I'd like to bring together musicians, jazzers, not necessarily just jazzers, but of different ethnic backgrounds, different ages, and I'd like to get into a band that does all of its own writing and arranging, and if we ever arrange a standard, we just twist it out of all possible recognition, I guess. Just bring our own thing to whatever we're doing. And I'd like to, again, different generations, young musicians, older generation, again, different ethnic backgrounds. They bring things from their own culture, and that's what I really miss about a bigger city here, is the heterogeneity, really, of a larger metro area. And you asked about the charitable element. I've done this for the past 2 sets of recordings. I've reached this point in my life where I really just want to give back as much as I possibly can. In this case, all proceeds from sales have gone mostly to local charities here in the Rogue Valley, but these things are floating around freely anyway in cyberspace. It just makes sense just to just to share the music in that way, and ask that any money spent go towards charities. That's what and again, I've given you some CDs for this station. I'd love to see you use that money for your, the station's purposes and whatever it needs in that case. Yeah.
Well, we are honored, Thor, to have you a part of the family here, and we're big proponents of open source, Creative Commons licensing, and that's what we do with all our original content. We'll put this up, and we're going to go out right here with a little piece called Summer. Thor, thank you so much. We look forward to talking with you again in the real near future.
James, thanks a lot, and Tom, great to hear your voice again, and all the best to both of you. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, is there a website, Thor? I'm so sorry. Let's get that in real quick.
I can be. I have my own website. Is www.thorpolson. That's THOR Polson. P as in Peter. OLSON.
Fantastic. Very simple. We'll put it up on the website as well if you want to check in. And we'll also be visiting with Thor again in the near future, and hopefully we'll get him here in Fairfield. It's a great listening community. But right now, here's a little bit of summer for you as we go into Inside the Headlines right here on solar-powered KRUU-FM. Thanks, Thor.
Thanks. And .com, too. ThorPolson.com. Thanks.
You got it.
Okay.